Finally, 1 week later, we're filming the second portion of our potato harvest. We're standing in our new for 2022 garden, and as you saw yesterday, we got 3 of our varieties of potatoes harvested. We're standing right where we took out those all red potatoes, and we've got 4 more types to go in this garden. We have our russets, our red-skinned, our blue-skinned, and our fingerlings, which we're not holding out for a lot coming from those because we weren't even going to plant them. But we're going to show you what we're working with today and continue on where we left off yesterday.
So today we are basically in this one garden because the bulk of our potatoes did get planted here. And as you can see, number 1 is our russets. So we've got, I think it's 3 fairly long rows. And they've got to come out first. And then behind them are our last 2 varieties, and our fingerlings are in another section. So we're going to get started with these russets, which are already kind of sitting at the surface. One thing quickly before we really get digging up here is we wanted to touch base briefly about some of these smaller potatoes. This is from yesterday's harvest, and we made the comment that we weren't going to use them, but I'm going to tell you what we are going to use them for. So a lot of those smaller potatoes are of course completely edible, and as you probably saw there, some of them were damaged. But what we're going to do with them this year, because we just find it more difficult to use them because of the cleaning or if you have to peel them, we're going to convert them into chicken feed. So stay tuned for that because yeah, it could be an interesting experiment. Well, as you can see, we are well on our way to having these 3 rows sorted, and many hands does make it go a lot faster. It is looking good. So we have our 3 rows of russet type potatoes out, and we've just kind of put them back on the row to let them dry a little bit. We've already started on the next variety, which this time it is our little red-skinned variety. We know this for a fact now. Unlike in
the only
yesterday's
other red one we have.
Unlike in the last potato harvest video. So how do you feel about this potato harvest?
I think we're doing amazing, and I think we're going to have a lot of good meals with these potatoes.
That's the plan.
We're going into our red-skinned potatoes, the ones that I talked about earlier and praised so much, yet turns out they were the all reds that we were actually digging up. But once again, I'm going to tell you again how wonderful these are. And the inside, I just sliced this one as we were digging, and I'm super excited because there's so many of these, it's not even funny. But the inside of these is very much the same as a russet potato. It's a whiter, harder center. Not like your Yukon Gold, which kind of is a better soft mashed potato type. Without any further ado, I'm going to show you how excited I am at how well these did, because this year I was hoping they were going to increase in size because we selected larger potatoes to plant for our seed potatoes, and it's happened. Come see. So we're getting in here and just starting to dig. The kids are taking off what was just on the surface. There's certainly some little ones, yes, but look at this beauty. We've got some big time improvement on the size of these, which is wonderful. And we're still getting tons out of the ground, even though there was lots on the surface. So I think this is going to be an amazing harvest. So we've had a learning curve, and this is what comes of not labeling things or marking rows or anything of that nature. So what we thought was that we had planted 3 rows of our red-skinned and 3 rows of our blue-skinned. Turned out to be 5 rows of red-skinned and 1 row of our all blues, because we made the decision this spring to no longer grow our blue-skinned potatoes. And the reason we decided that was because we never got any substantial size growth with them. They always were these little things, and I hated them because cleaning them and everything else just was so much work compared to even when you get to like that size, you know, that's good, but the little tiny pea-sized ones was just horrible. So anyways, we'd forgotten that we'd done that, so we actually only had 3 types left to harvest today. Our russets, the red-skinned, and then we still have our fingerlings. We did just get a little token gesture of all blues in this one last row that we had, which will just kind of bulk that out because our all blues actually didn't do super great in the other gardens, so I'm kind of glad we have these. And they actually, the ones that grew really nice over here. No scab, no nothing, so that's a good thing.
Well, before we go on to our very last variety of potatoes, we kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the russets And the red skin varieties, like Stephanie just said, we had more of the red skin variety planted than we thought we did, and they did really, really well. The russets did as well. They both produced very good. Very curious once we get these sort of boxed up and over to the scale to see how much we actually ended up with between these russets and these red-skinned varieties. Well, daylight is starting to wane on us, but we have one more type of potato to get out of the ground, which is our little, I think they were the Austrian Crescent fingerling type potato, if I remember correctly. These were our most neglected potatoes by far, and they were really an afterthought too. We almost decided not to plant them, and then we looked at what we'd put aside for seed potato and went, geez, they're pretty nice, so we put them in, but really not sure what to expect from these. So as you can kind of see, we've cleared the weeds out, but yeah, they were pretty overgrown, so we'll see how they did. So somebody was helping to dig these fingerling potatoes. So would you say digging potatoes is a lot of work?
No, I wouldn't say it's as much work to some of it, but...
So are potatoes an easy thing to grow?
I'd say yes.
These little guys are out of the ground. And as you can see, they're a lot smaller than the other varieties we grow. But as we were digging, we were basically talking about them. And they're very prolific little potatoes. They do taste good. And every year we plant them and we kind of hem and haw about it. And then we decide to plant them and they always kind of get a terrible deal and they still produce. So they're probably still going to stay because in the grand scheme of things, it's not that much work for what we just got. With all the potatoes now dug and out of the ground, how do you feel about what we've harvested so far, even though we haven't weighed everything, and also the amount of work it takes to grow potatoes?
We're good potato farmers. I mean, if we looked after them better, we'd be even better potato farmers. Every year they get full of weeds. We never, ever go back to them. We never water them, which then makes it that realistically, taking that into consideration, they are very little work. You plant them and we basically operate on the forget about them. And maybe next year we should try and do a little bit better with that and keep the weeds at bay a little bit more and maybe mounding some stuff. You know, we've been doing this for a few years now. You can tell it's feeding time around here because it's getting dark. But we've been doing this for a few years now in this location, and we know in the ground works best, but we also know if we do them in the ground, we've got to figure out a way to control the weeds. And I think if we do that, we are going to be amazing potato farmers. But all in all, I'm very, very happy with this harvest. This, I think, is going to top last year. I'm not 100% sure, but it's going to be pretty darn close at least. And we know last year we had plenty of potatoes, and we still had some left to use this summer, so that's pretty good.
So for today, we are going to get these all picked up and brought back to the house. And we're going to do the weighing and a little bit of extra drying before we box them up for storage tomorrow. So it doesn't look like much, but
Yes, it does.
but this is the sum of our potato harvest. So these potatoes over here are for eating, and we've isolated our seed potatoes for next year, for 2023, over here.
I'm the math person here. I'm going to go through the wonderful numbers and tell you where we went, or ended up, I guess. The 3 varieties that you've watched us harvest in this video are what we had remaining. And in the end, it was pretty good. Some of these delivered really, really, really well. And for bonus, we even found a few extra pounds of all blue potatoes, which is wonderful, because those are ones that we quite enjoy. But in the end, we had our russet potatoes, which we dug up and ended up with 53 pounds. Our red skinned potatoes, which we're super pleased with 66 pounds. And our fingerlings with 18 pounds. So all in all, we talked about the all red and how we'd ended up with about 6.5, almost 7 pounds of potatoes for every pound that we planted. The red skinned actually delivered pretty darn close to the same. We got basically 6.5 pounds per pound of seed potato. So that's pretty good in the general average of what you should get per potato. So in this bucket, we have what I'm calling the chicken potatoes. These are all those horrible little guys that I said I really can't stand cleaning little potatoes, or they're ones that got damaged and we just decided that they needed to be used up quick, and we're going to cook them up for some chicken food, which will be coming in a future video. But in the end, this bucket was 13 pounds of chicken potatoes. So that's not too bad for some chicken food that we're going to work on developing. And we still counted this bucket in the overall total for how many potatoes the farm produced this year. So we're going to go into those numbers next. In total, grand total for how many potatoes we brought into the house this year, we have 302.5 pounds of potatoes in 6 different varieties. Now, a little bit less than last year, but super pleased with that. The downfall is, I think, pounds versus how many we planted, I think was lower this year. We planted 81 pounds of seed potatoes. So really, we only got 3 pounds for every pound that we put in. So I think that's a little bit low, but all in all, super pleased. We definitely have enough potatoes to see us through, and I think the quality of the potatoes that we've chosen to store is way better than last year, which kind of brings us to our final point of, even though we brought in 302.5 pounds, only 222.5 of those pounds are for human consumption, and we're going to show you why.
So as we mentioned in these boxes, we've already put aside what we think are some of the best examples for seed potatoes. And in total, we've put away 67 pounds. Most are about 12 pounds for variety. The Austrian Crescents, which are in the small box on top, that's a lot less. I think
it's only 6 pounds. We did half.
But that should put us in pretty good shape for next year. So kind of going back through this a little bit, it definitely was a red potato year. They did far better than they have in the past. We did decide to not grow one of our blue potatoes, the blue skin variety we had. So for blue potatoes, it was just our all blues. They did really well, and they were in much better shape than last year, 2021.
But by taking away one, of course, the temptation is there to always try something new, and we've been kind of exploring some different varieties that we'd like to consider for next year. So it's really going to come down to what's available, which is why you should keep your own seed potatoes, because you never know what's going to be available next year.
Well, the all reds and the all blues are great examples of that, because we got them in 2019, wasn't it? And we haven't been able to get seed potatoes locally for them again.
Yeah.
So if we didn't keep them, we wouldn't be growing them. And we like both those varieties.
And on another note, another thing that we also have discovered, we made some really, really bad decisions this year with our Yukon Golds. As you saw in the harvest in the last video, they weren't really stellar for quality of the potatoes. So we ended up, we only set aside 12 pounds of seed potatoes for them, because we really felt we only had 12 pounds that was quality enough to do that. So really we are banking, because that was kind of our main potato. So we are hoping to be able to get some fresh Yukon Gold seed potatoes to add to our planting for next year, because we normally would plant more than 12 pounds of those. So that's part of why we're not setting aside the 81 pounds that we did last year. But all in all, I think it's been a great harvest.